There are some people in this world who look at an old woman with a worn coat and a slow walk and see nothing, no history, no weight, no story worth knowing. And sometimes that kind of blindness costs everything. Meredith Agnes Calloway was 67 years old the morning she walked into the Grand Harrington Hotel in downtown Chicago, and nobody in that lobby gave her a second glance. That was fine. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed second glances. She had spent 40 years building something that didn't require applause to exist. But what happened to her that Tuesday morning? In front of a lobby full of strangers, under the cold white light of a chandelier that probably cost more than most people's cars. That was something else entirely. She had flown in from Portland the night before. Red-eye flight, middle seat, the kind of travel that grinds your bones down to chalk. She was tired in that specific way that only comes after 60, not just the body, but the spirit, carrying years of loss alongside the carry-on luggage. Her husband, Robert, had died 3 winters ago. Her younger sister, the spring before that. She didn't talk about those things with strangers. She kept them folded neatly inside her chest, the way you fold a letter you've read too many times to count. She was wearing a tan raincoat, the kind that had been practical once and now just looked old. Dark slacks, comfortable shoes, because her knees had been talking to her since her early 60s and she had learned to listen. Her silver hair was pulled back with a clip. She carried a single rolling suitcase and a canvas tote bag with a library logo on the side. She did not look like what she was. She never had. The Grand Harrington lobby was all marble and hushed voices and the faint smell of expensive flowers. A large gold clock above the reception desk read 7:14 in the morning. There were maybe a dozen people moving through the space. Business travelers, a young couple checking in, a bellhop stacking luggage near the elevator bank. Meredith approached the front desk. The man behind it was named Brett. That was what his name tag said. Brett was perhaps 32, with a kind of smooth confidence that comes from never having been told no in a context that truly mattered. He had perfect posture and an easy smile that he deployed like a tool. Not warmly, but efficiently. He was finishing a conversation with a colleague when Meredith arrived at the desk. She waited. She had always been patient. Patience was something grief teaches you, if you're willing to learn. After a long moment, Brett turned to her. The smile appeared, but his eyes traveled over her. The coat, the canvas bag, the shoes, and something shifted behind them. A small recalibration. Almost invisible if you didn't know what to look for. "Can I help you?" he said. The tone was polite the way a closed door is polite. "Good morning," Meredith said. "I have a reservation." "Calloway." Brett typed something into his computer. He frowned slightly. "A reservation for the Harrington suite?" He said it the way you'd say, "Are you sure you have the right address?" "That's right," Meredith said. Brett glanced up from the screen, then back down, then up again. "Ma'am, I want to make sure we're talking about the same reservation. The Harrington suite is our premium accommodation. Nightly rate starts at—" "I know what the rate is," Meredith said pleasantly. Brett cleared his throat. "Of course. I just want to confirm, this reservation was made under Calloway Enterprises?" It was. Something flickered across his face. A decision being made. He straightened slightly and said, in the same polished tone, "I'm going to need to ask you to step aside for a moment. There may be a discrepancy with the reservation. If you'll wait over there," he gestured toward the seating area near the window. "I'll have someone assist you." Meredith looked at the seating area, then back at Brett. "A discrepancy," she repeated. "Just a formality," he said. "We take our reservation integrity very seriously." She studied him for a moment. Then she said, "All right," and stepped aside. She sat down in one of the high-backed chairs near the window. She set her canvas bag on her lap. Outside, Chicago was beginning its morning. Cabs and delivery trucks. A woman walking a dog. Steam rising from a grate in the sidewalk. Meredith watched it, and thought about nothing in particular. She was good at waiting. She had buried people she loved. Waiting in a hotel lobby was nothing. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. No one came. From across the lobby she could see Brett at the front desk, checking in other guests. A man in an expensive suit. A woman with a designer carry-on. He moved through those interactions with ease and warmth, leaning forward, laughing at something, sliding key cards across the marble counter with the smooth motion of someone entirely in his element. He did not look over at Meredith once. After 20 minutes, she stood up, picked up her suitcase, and walked back to the desk. "Excuse me," she said. Brett looked up. For just a fraction of a second, something crossed his face. Not guilt exactly, but the near cousin of it. "Ma'am, someone will be with you shortly." "You've had me waiting for 20 minutes, Meredith said. Not loudly, not angrily. Just factually, the way you'd read a temperature off a thermometer. "I understand, and I apologize for the wait. As I mentioned, there's a discrepancy." "There is no discrepancy," Meredith said. "The reservation was made 6 weeks ago. It was confirmed twice. I have the confirmation number if you need it." She set her tote bag on the counter and began looking through it. Brett reached out and placed his hand on the counter. Not quite touching the bag, but close. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you not to place items on the Brett." The voice came from behind Meredith. Calm. Measured. Female. Brett's hand froze. Meredith turned around. A woman in her late 40s stood a few feet away, holding a tablet and a travel mug. Her name was Diane Osei, and she was the Grand Harrington's Director of Guest Experience, a title that meant, in practice, that she oversaw everything that touched an arriving guest from the moment they walked through the front door to the moment they left. She had been at the Harrington for 11 years. She knew the property the way you know your own heartbeat. She also knew who Meredith Agnes Calloway was. She had known it the moment she walked out of the elevator and saw the silver-haired woman in the tan coat sitting alone by the window while Brett continued checking in other guests. Diane had stood there for a moment watching, making sure she was seeing what she thought she was seeing. She was. She walked across the lobby now with the kind of deliberate calm that communicates everything without raising a voice. "Brett," she said again, stepping beside Meredith. "Is there a problem with this guest's reservation?" Brett opened his mouth. Closed it. I was verifying." "Pull up the Calloway reservation," Diane said. Brett typed. His face changed as he read the screen. Not all at once. Slowly. The way a window fogs in cold air. Diane didn't look at the screen. She looked at Brett. "Who does this reservation belong to?" she said quietly. Brett's voice came out slightly different than before. "Calloway Enterprises." "And who," Diane said, "is the founder and executive chair of Calloway Enterprises?" The lobby was not silent. Lobbies never are. But the air around the front desk had gone very still. Brett looked at the woman standing beside Diane, at the tan coat, at the canvas bag with the library logo, at the comfortable shoes. He looked, and he understood, and the color left his face the way water leaves a glass. Quickly, completely. "Ms. Calloway," Diane said, turning to Meredith with a warmth that was entirely genuine. "I am so sorry for this morning. Please allow me to personally escort you to your suite." Meredith looked at Brett for a moment. He was staring at the counter. His jaw was tight. "Thank you, Diane," Meredith said. She picked up her canvas bag, took the handle of her rolling suitcase, and followed Diane toward the elevator. She did not look back. The elevator was all dark wood paneling and soft light. Diane stood beside her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then Diane said, "I want to apologize again. Genuinely, that should never have happened." "It happens more than it should," Meredith said, without bitterness. "Just an observation." Something she had said before, in one form or another, in airports and boardrooms and on the street corners of her life. "You could have said who you were immediately," Diane said. Not as an accusation. More like a question she was trying to understand. Meredith was quiet for a moment. The elevator rose. When Robert, my husband, was sick, she said finally. I used to go to the hospital coffee shop every morning before his treatment started. There was a woman who worked the counter. Eleanor. She knew my name by the second week. She'd have my coffee ready before I even reached the register. She paused. She didn't know who I was. She just looked at me and saw someone who needed a cup of coffee and a kind word. The elevator chimed softly. That's the version of the world I prefer, Meredith said, when it works that way. The suite was at the end of a long, quiet hallway on the 22nd floor. Diane opened the door and stepped back. The room was extraordinary. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over Lake Michigan. The water silver gray in the morning light. A sitting room with pale furniture, fresh flowers on every surface, the smell of something clean and faintly botanical. Diane set the key card on the table by the door. Is there anything you need? Anything at all? Some coffee, Meredith said, and maybe a little quiet. Both on their way, Diane said. She hesitated at the door. Ms. Calloway, the staff member at the desk. I want you to know that will be addressed. I know you'll handle it appropriately, Meredith said. That's your job. Diane nodded and left. Meredith stood alone in the suite for a moment. She walked to the window and looked out at the lake. She had grown up in Chicago. She had left at 22 with $30 and a scholarship and a certainty she couldn't explain. She had built the company slowly, painfully, the way you build anything real. By showing up, by failing, by starting again the next morning without drama. She had been dismissed 1,000 times, looked past, underestimated. Early in her career it had stung, then it had hardened into something useful. Then it had simply become part of the landscape, like the weather. Something to account for, not something to fight every single day. She thought about Robert. He used to say, "Don't explain yourself to people who haven't earned the explanation." He had learned that before she had. He always learned things before she did, and then waited patiently for her to arrive. She missed him in the way you miss a specific quality of light, not just the person, but the whole atmosphere of a life. She pulled off her coat and draped it over the chair. She sat down near the window with her hands in her lap and looked at the water and let herself be tired for a few minutes. Just tired. Not angry, not triumphant, not anything in particular. Just a 67-year-old woman, alone in a beautiful room, carrying all the years she had lived. There was a knock at the door 20 minutes later. Coffee, as promised. And a small card from the hotel's general manager, a handwritten note of apology, brief and sincere. She read it once, set it on the table, poured her coffee. Later that afternoon she had meetings, 4 of them, back to back, in one of the hotel's conference rooms. She had come to Chicago for a board session, a quarterly review of the company she had spent her life building. There would be 30 people in that room, some of whom she had known for decades, and some of whom she had never met in person. She wore a different coat to the meetings. A good one. She always had both. The coat that let her move through the world without being seen, and the coat that announced her arrival. She chose deliberately, depending on what the day required. She did not need to announce herself today. Word travels fast in hotels. By the time Meredith walked through the lobby at noon, Brett was no longer behind the front desk. Diane stood near the concierge station and gave Meredith a small nod. Meredith nodded back. The board meeting went well. The company's numbers were good. The new partnership she had spent 8 months negotiating was officially approved. After the final session, one of the younger board members, a woman in her early 30s named Patience, who had joined the company 2 years ago, walked with Meredith to the elevator. "Can I ask you something?" Patience said. "You can ask," Meredith said. "Does it still happen? People not recognizing you, treating you like..." She stopped herself. Started again. "Does it get easier to deal with?" Meredith thought about this. "It doesn't get easier to deal with." Meredith thought about this. "It doesn't get easier," she said, "but it gets less important. There's a difference." She pressed the elevator button. At some point you stop needing the world to recognize you. You know what you've built. You know what it cost. That knowing lives inside you whether anyone else can see it or not. Patience was quiet for a moment. That's a hard way to live. Most worthwhile things are, Meredith said. The elevator opened. Good night, Patience, Meredith said, and stepped in. She rode back up to the 22nd floor alone, in the dark paneled elevator with its soft light, and she thought about nothing much. The lake at dawn. Robert's voice. Eleanor at the coffee counter, handing over a cup without needing to be asked. She thought about the morning, and Brett's face when the color left it, and how she had felt. Not vindicated, not triumphant. Something quieter than that. Something closer to tired. Because here's the truth, and it's the truth that doesn't make for a neat ending. But it's the only honest one. It shouldn't have happened. None of it should have happened. The waiting. The hand on the counter. The 20 minutes by the window while other guests were checked in without a second thought. Those 20 minutes belong to a category of small violences that don't leave bruises, that no one files a report about, that simply accumulate in the body over a lifetime like sediment. Meredith Calloway had built a company with 400 employees and offices in 7 cities. She had outlasted people who doubted her, outlived people she loved, navigated decades that would have broken someone with less resolve. She had done all of it while also being, in the eyes of strangers, simply an old woman in a worn coat. That morning in the lobby, she hadn't needed Brett to know who she was. She had never needed that. What she had needed what any human being needs, was to be treated like a person. Not a problem. Not a discrepancy. A person. That's what I keep thinking about when I think about Meredith. Not the moment Brett went pale. Not the suite on the 22nd floor. I keep thinking about Eleanor at the hospital coffee shop. I keep thinking about what it means to look at someone and choose, before you know anything about them, to treat them with dignity. That choice doesn't cost anything. And the failure to make it, as Brett discovered on a Tuesday morning in Chicago, can cost more than you planned to spend.